Hi everyone, in this video we will be going over A-Level Accounting 2020 February-March paper 2 question number 4. This is the structured paper 2 which consists of 4 questions. 2 of them are of 30 marks and 2 of them are of 15 marks, and we're also given a time limit of 1 hour and 30 minutes. Since question number 4 is of 30 marks, ideally we should be spending about 30 minutes in order to complete this question, and in this video as well we will be attempting to solve this question under 30 minutes. So without any further delay, let's get started. Cuthbert runs a manufacturing business which has 2 production departments and 1 service department. The business allocates and apportions overhead expenditure between production and service departments. For the first part of this question, we need to explain one difference between the overhead allocation and overhead apportionment. So it is quite simple. Overhead allocation is used when the entire expense is directly related to one department, whereas overhead apportionment is used when the overhead is related to more than one department. Let's write it down. Overhead allocation is used when the whole expense is directly related to one department, whereas our overhead apportionment is used when the overhead is related to more than one department. This concludes the first part. Let's move to the second one. We now need to state what is meant by a production department. So the production department is that department which is directly involved in manufacturing the products. Let's write it down. Production department is the department which is directly involved in manufacturing the products. And we also need to state what is meant by a service department. A service department is the department which is not directly involved in manufacturing the products, but it does provide support to other departments. Let's write it down. Service department is the department which is not directly involved in manufacturing the products, but provides support to other departments. Alright, this concludes the second part. We can now move towards the third one. We're given additional information. We're provided the budgeted information for rent, heating and lighting, depreciation, as well as employee overheads. Then we're also provided the area, electricity used, non-current assets, number of employees, direct labor hours and machine hours for our 2 production department as well as the service department. And then we're told that service department costs are reapportioned on the basis of electricity used. And we can see that the electricity used is given right here. Now let's have a look at our question. We need to complete the table to apportion the budgeted overheads to each department and reapportion the service department costs to the 2 production departments. So firstly, we need to allocate the overheads: rent, heating, lighting, depreciation, and employee overheads for these 3 departments. Let's have a look for rent. We can see that the total rent is 18,000, and now we can see that the area is also given for each of the departments. And since we're talking about rent, it should be allocated on the basis of the area covered by each of the departments, right? So let's figure out the total area. That will be 4,500 plus 3,000 plus 1,500, which results in 9,000. Now for production department 1, rent will be 18,000, and out of the total area it covers 4,500. So that will be 4,500 out of the total area of 9,000. And this results in the amount of 9,000. Now we repeat the same process for production department 2. We have the total cost of 18,000 and the area covered by production department 2 is 3,000 out of 9,000. This results in 6,000. Now for the service department, that's going to be 18,000 and the area covered is 1,500. So that will be 1,500 divided by 9,000. And this results in the amount of 3,000. Let's write down these three amounts in our statement. For production department 1, it was 9,000. For production department 2, it was 6,000. For service department, it was 3,000 and the total was given to be 18,000. Now we repeat the same process for heating and lighting. We can see that the total expense is 12,500. And since we're talking about heating and lighting, it should definitely be allocated on the basis of electricity consumed by each of the department, which is given right here. So let's figure out the total first. That is 60,000 plus 30,000 plus 10,000, which results in 100,000. Now for production department 1, the heating and lighting expense would be the total of 12,500. And out of the total electricity used, production department 1 utilized 60,000 of it. So that will be 60,000 divided by 100,000. And this results in an expense of 7,500. Then for production department 2, we have the total expense of 12,500 and the electricity consumed by production department 2 is given to be 30,000. So that will be 30,000 out of the total of 100,000. And this results in an expense of 3,750. Then for the service department, that will be 12,500 and the electricity consumed is 10,000. So that's going to be 10,000 divided by 100,000, which results in an expense of 1,250. Let's write down these three amounts in our statement. So that was 7,500 for production department 1, 3,750 for production department 2, and 1,250 for the service department, and the total was given to be 12,500. Now we need to repeat the same process for depreciation. We can see that the total depreciation is given to be 11,200, and the allocation of depreciation should be based on either the cost of our non-current assets or its net book value. And in this case, we can see that we're given the net book value right here. So let's figure out the total. We only have the net book value for our two production departments. So that's 75,000 plus 45,000, which results in 120,000. Now the depreciation charge for production department 1 is just going to be the total of 11,200. And out of the total net book value, 75,000 belongs to the first department. So that's going to be 75,000 divided by the total of 120,000. And this results in the depreciation of 7,000. Then for production department 2, we again start with our total depreciation of 11,200 and we can see that the net book value for production department 2 is 45,000. So that will be 45,000 out of the total of 120,000. This results in the depreciation charge for production department 2 to be 4,200. Let's write these two amounts in our statement. So that's 7,000 and 4,200. And the total is 11,200. Then we have employee overheads. We can see the total employee overheads is given to be 8,300. And employee overheads should be allocated on the basis of number of employees in each of the departments, which is given right here. Let's figure out the total. That will be 45 plus 25 plus 13, which results in 83. Alright, so for our production department 1, we will start with the total employee overheads given to be 8,300. And then we can see that the number of employees is 45 out of the total of 83. So we just multiply it with that ratio. So 45 by 83, this results in the expense of 4,500. Now for production department 2, we repeat the same process. That is 8,300. And the number of employees, we can see is 25 out of 83. So that will be times 25 by 83, which results in an expense of 2,500. Then for the service department, we again start with the total of 8,300. And we can see that the number of employees is given to be 13. So we just multiply it by 13 and then divide it by the total of 83, which results in the amount of 1,300. So let's copy these three amounts in our statement. That's 4,500, 2500 and 1300, and the total was 8300. Now the next step would be to figure out the total of rent, heating and lighting, depreciation, as well as the employee overheads for each of these departments. So let's start with production department 1. That is the sum of these four amounts: 9000 plus 7500 plus 7000 plus 4500, which results in the amount of 28,000. Then for production department 2, that is the sum of these four amounts: 6000 plus 3750 plus 4200 plus 2500, which results in 16450. And for service department, that is the sum of these three amounts, so that's 3000 plus 1250 plus 1300, which results in 5550. And then now we have the total, that is 18,000 plus 12,500 plus 11,200 plus 8,300, which results in 50,000. Now the next step would be to reapportion the overheads of service department to our two production departments. And we were given the basis above. We are told that service department costs are to be reapportioned on the basis of electricity used, which is given right here. And now we only need to divide it among the two production departments. So we only require the total of these two, so that will be 60,000 and 30,000, which results in the total of 90,000. Now the apportionment towards production department 1, we will just start with the total of our service department, which we figured out to be 5,550. And we can see that the production department 1 utilizes 60,000 of electricity out of the total of 90,000 for these two departments. So that will be times 60,000 divided by 90,000, which results in the amount of 3,700. Again, for production department 2, we start with the total of 5,550, and the second department utilizes 30,000 out of the total of 90,000. So that's 30,000 divided by 90,000, which results in an amount of 1,850. Let's write it down. So that's 3,700, 1,850. And reapportionment just means that we are taking this amount of 5,550 from service department and allocating it towards the two production departments. So now the service department's overhead should be 0. So in order to make this 0, I'm just going to subtract the same amount. Now we can figure out our total overheads. So that will be just the sum of the previous total and the reapportionment amount. So for production department 1, that is going to be 28,000 plus 3,700, which results in 31,700. And for production department 2, that is 16,450 plus 1,850, which results in 18,300. And for service departments, that is going to be 0. This concludes the third part of this question. We can now move towards the fourth one. We now need to calculate the overhead absorption rate for both production departments using an appropriate basis, and we need to give our answer to two decimal places. The formula for overhead absorption rate is quite easy. We always start with the total overheads that we just figured out from the above statement, and then divide it with the maximum of our machine hours or the direct labor hours. Alright, so for production department 1, we figured out the total overhead to be 31,700. Now we just need to divide it by the maximum of the machine hours or the direct labor hours. Let's have a look above. We were given the direct labor hours and machine hours right here, and for the first production department, we can see that the greater one is the direct labor hours. So we will be utilizing this number of 4,000. Let's write it down. So that's 4,000. Now this gives the overhead absorption rate for production department 1 to be 7.93. And since we utilize the direct labor hours, we should be mentioning our basis clearly. So this will be per direct labor hour. Now we just repeat the same process for production department 2. We first start with the total overhead of 18,300. Now let's have a look above. We can see that for production department 2, the machine hour is the greater one. So we will be utilizing this number of 2,000. And this gives the overhead absorption rate to be 9.15. And our basis is machine hour. This concludes the fourth part. We can now move towards the fifth one. Now we need to explain the reason for reapportionment of the service department costs. So we have already mentioned that service department is not directly involved with the manufacturing of the products, but they assist other departments, right? So this means that the service centers incur overhead costs, and these costs are charged to the product by transferring it to the production centers on an appropriate basis, as we did in the above question, right? And this is done in order to ensure that all costs are recovered in the sale of the products. Let's write it down. Service centers incur overhead costs and these costs are charged to the product by transferring to the production centers on an appropriate basis. And this is done to ensure that all costs are recovered in the sale of products. This concludes the fifth part. We can now move towards the sixth one. We now need to state three limitations of using absorption costing. So absorption costing is not used for short-term decision making. That is a limitation. Then we also know that if we utilize our absorption costing, then we cannot calculate the break-even points. So that can also act as a limitation. And lastly, absorption costing can be very subjective because we need to reapportion the overheads, right? And the basis can be different for each of the companies and the industries as well. Alright, this concludes the sixth part. We can now move towards the seventh one. We are again given additional information where a customer has made a request for a special order. The manufacturer of this order would require direct materials of 2,800 and direct labor of 3,200. Alright, then we are given the direct labor hours as well as the machine hours required for production department 1 and production department 2. And Cuthbert wishes to achieve a profit margin of 35% on this order. We now need to calculate the price to quote for this special order. We first start with figuring out our total cost. So let's prepare a statement. We can start with the direct materials of 2,800. Then we have the direct labor of 3,200. Now we also need to include the overheads. And the overheads is for two different departments. So firstly, we have for production department 1. And then we have it for production department 2. And in order to figure out the overheads, we just multiply the overhead absorption rate with its particular basis. So if we're talking about production department 1, we have already calculated its overhead absorption rate to be 7.93. Now we need to multiply it with our direct labor hours given. So let's do that. That's going to be 7.93 times the direct labor hours for our production department, which is given to be 80. And this gives the overhead for production department 1 to be 634.40. Now we repeat the same process for production department 2. We have the overhead absorption rate to be 9.15, and this is based on our machine hours. So we just multiply it with that. So the rate was 9.15. Then we multiply it with the machine hours, which is given to be 100. And this gives the overheads for our production department 2 to have the amount of 915. Alright, now we can figure out our total cost by adding these four amounts. So that will be 2,800 plus 3,200 plus 634.4 plus 915, which results in 7,549.4. Okay, now in order to figure out the selling price, we first need to add the profit, and this will give our selling price. Here the basis for profit is given to be 35%, so we require a profit margin of 35%. Let's write down the formula for profit margin. That is just the profit divided by selling price times 100%, and we require this to be 35%. And we also know that selling price is just the sum of our cost and profit, right? So that is profit divided by, I'm just going to substitute the amount that we figured out for cost, which was 7,549.4. So that's cost plus profit. And if you bring this 100% to other side, that will be 35 by 100, which you can write down as 0.35. Now let's bring this to the other side. That will be P equals to 0.35 times 7,549.4 plus 0.35P. Let's bring this to this side. So that will be P minus 0.35P equals to 0.35 times 7,549.4. Now 1 minus 0.35 will just be 0.65, and this will be equal to 0.35 times 7,549.4. Now this gives our profit to be 0.35 times 7,549.4 divided by 0.65. This results in the amount of 4,065.06. Let's substitute this value into our statement. Now the selling price will just be the sum of these two amounts, cost and the profit, and this results in an amount of 11,614.46. This concludes the 7th part. We can now move towards the 8th one. We are given additional information. So the customer offered 9,000 for this order, but we have just figured out that we require the selling price to be 11,614. Now we need to advise Cuthbert whether or not he should accept the order by justifying our answer. So we can see that the amount that we will be receiving will be 9,000. So this now acts as the selling price, right? So let's figure out the contribution. We have the total direct cost to be direct materials and direct labor. So that's the total of 2,800 and 3,200, which results in 6,000. And we can clearly see that the selling price is greater than this contribution amount of 6,000, which means that there will be a positive contribution, right? We can write that down. There will be a positive contribution. And let's figure out the profit as well. We can see that our total cost is 7,549.4, which is again lower than our selling price that we are receiving of 9,000, which just means that it will result in a profit. So it will result in a profit, but this will be lower, but a lower margin. The next thing we need to consider is the customer. We need to consider whether this customer is likely to make more orders in the future and at what price. Because if this is only a one-time order, maybe we should not settle for this lower selling price. But if the customer is likely to remain loyal to our company, then it would be wise to accept this order. Let's write it down. Consider whether customer is likely to make more orders and at what price. And we also need to consider the effect on other customers when they figure out that we are providing this goods for a lower price or a reduced price. Let's write it down. Consider effect on other customers learning of reduced price. Because if we are providing goods at a reduced price to one customer, then other customers might want the same thing for them. We now need to write down our decision clearly about whether or not he should accept this order. And since we can see that there is a positive contribution as well as a profit, I would advise Cuthbert to accept this offer. So let's write down that decision clearly. Alright, this concludes our 8th part of this question as well as the entire question number 4 of 2020 February-March paper 2-2. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.